And Jackie here, being joined by a good friend, Chance Patrick, as we spend a little time in Iowa's great outdoors. And weather like this, there's plenty to do outside, isn't there?
I've been having fun. Some of the hunting seasons are open. I've been dove hunting here last, since it started. I've been out 3 or 4 times, and it feels good just to get back out and breathe and just watch nature, right there in front of you. And I've had a blast. It's been good, but archery season is what's coming up, and that's my style. I like to set up in the tree with my bow and just sit there for hours and just take it all in. But a lot of people just grab their bow and think they're gonna go. Well, you have to prep. I mean, we owe it to the animal to have everything 100% before we head to the field, and sometimes it takes a little getting used to shooting my bow again, because I don't touch it all summer. I've done it for so long, I just don't touch it, but my muscles are like, oh, you can shoot a bow, and then they're like, oh, no, you can't. So I always like to tell people, a month, at least a month before, get your bow out and inspect it, because it does set all year. It's getting hot, it's getting cold, it's just in different, humidity is a huge thing on bows because they are pressed laminated limbs under pressure all the time. So like I just put my strings back on. I always take them off.
I was going to say, do you remove them?
I do. I personally do. You don't have to. I like it because I've had a bow set before and it warped the limbs. Might have been my fault, but I've never took that risk again because these bows can get expensive. So I take the strings off and let the bow relax.
Right, you can get expensive. Throw some numbers around.
A bow, $500
really?
Just for the bow.
Wow.
Well, let's talk about, okay, so what is the process you went through to kind of, let's say,
get it ready for today?
Get it ready for today, yeah.
So I had to put all the strings back on.
Okay.
Okay, so before I put the strings back on, or even before I pull this back, I want to inspect these strings. There's a lot of pressure on this bow. This thing is zipping. It's a very fast bow, so that means there's a lot of pressure in these cams. So I wanted to inspect and make sure they didn't have no dry rot. That's why we have the wax. They call this one string snot, but it's like a huge thing of chapstick that we're going to put on the string and rub it in with a piece of leather to bury that product down in here to keep it waterproof and to keep it from rotting.
How long does a string usually last under normal use?
I've seen strings on bows that were original from 30 years ago.
Really?
Yeah, it just depends though, but as these bows are getting newer and faster, there's a lot more pressure on them than there used to be 20 years ago. If you take a bow from 20 years ago and lay it up next to this, the technology has changed so much. It's on the cam system, the way it rolls, the speed out of it. The speed out of these bows is very, very fast anymore.
If we're greasing it up, do we do it before it's on the bow or once it's on the bow?
Either or. I always like to do it while it's off so I can stretch them out.
Right.
You don't have to try to work in here.
Absolutely.
I do it before I put them back on.
And do you do that once, or do you need to do that throughout the season?
No, you don't want to do it too much. You can over wax your string, and a lot of these new products they're making strings out of.
I was going to ask you, what are they made out of nowadays?
I don't know. That was my job, just to tell them what color I want, and then they do their job building. It's not something we want to try building ourselves because of the pressure on these bows. I've actually had a bow let loose on me before with a string break, and it's not a pretty thing when they do. So it's always good to get it out, check over all your rest, make sure everything's tight, make sure everything's in good order before you take it out in the field, or even before you start shooting the sight in for the season. There were some things like this morning, I just standing out here, I always just grab it and look it over, but as you can see, I had a serving break.
What does that mean?
That's what's holding that string around the bottom of that cam so it doesn't wear the strings. So by me putting the string back on and adding pressure to it, it's set long enough that I found I have a serving bad.
So what do you have to do to repair that then?
We'll go out to Bass Pro and have them put a new string on it.
So it's a whole new string?
I always have an extra set of strings just in case. But yeah, I had a serving. Just noticed that this morning standing out in the hallway.
How about that?
So something,
Always important to kind of look over your gear to make sure it's how you need it to be, so you're being protected, and as you said, you can have the greatest experience possible. Okay, so besides stringing her up and greasing her up and getting her ready, what else are we looking at?
Our arrows.
Okay.
It's another thing. This is carbon fiber, very lightweight, very strong. I mean, the carbon fiber, Lou, is very light, but it's very actually strong. So this is my arrow, but sometimes people will leave them setting up against a wall or something, leaning up against something. They're eventually going to warp.
They will?
Yeah, they'll bend just by setting. The weight of itself will start to bend.
No way.
Yeah, carbon's a little different, but like aluminum arrows are real bad for it. Like an example, a lot of people used to set the bows in the corner or hang them on a wall. Gravity will eventually warp those and ruin them.
So how do you
Can I see that for a second?
Yeah, it's very
okay,
sharp
just
on
kind
the
of,
end.
I was going to say, just wanted to give you a quick shot of, I mean, this is extremely light. We're talking grams here, but look at that point, something that can be very dangerous. Are we looking at anything to make sure that's okay as well?
So, especially on the toxic, that end unscrews. And the one thing I like to make sure is it's nice and tight so those blades don't come off in the air because they can send that arrow in a direction we don't want it to go.
Right, absolutely.
An arrow I'm very picky on. I like to fletch, which means what we call the feathers on the end. I like to put those on myself. I like to adjust my nocks and my broadhead.
Okay, explain what that means.
So the knock is what goes on the string. That's what snaps on the end.
On the end here.
Okay, and then our broadhead is on the end. That's what everybody likes to call the razor blades of an arrow. And by the time you get it all put together, it needs to be right because it's coming out of 400 feet per second. And
Wow.
That's really
now, how
getting
long
it.
does an arrow usually last?
Okay, so I've always had a rule. After an animal has been harvested with that arrow, I do not use it again because it blows through. It could hit a rock, it could crack. And with that kind of speed, like we keep talking about, I'm not taking a risk putting that arrow through my arm as it breaks, you know. So if I harvest an animal with it, it's done. It's done. I keep them. I keep every one of them. I just don't reshoot them.
Okay,
I mean,
so if you harvest an animal, what if you shoot and miss?
I wouldn't use it.
You wouldn't use it again.
Wouldn't use it. It's
So
not
once
worth the
you
risk.
launch it, basically you're done.
If somebody was to say, well, I reuse my arrows because they're expensive, and it comes down to the season where you shot your last arrow, but you still have one tag and you need an arrow, call me because I'd rather give you an arrow than have that risk. Arrows are not cheap because of the technology of the carbon. They're getting pricey.
Okay, again, throw me some numbers.
Those arrows are $179.
How much?
$179 a dozen unfletched.
Oh my goodness.
Now, I said you've done it for so long, you don't really practice in the off season, but is there a place that people want to kind of get, if it is this expensive, to shoot one of these off and they can't just waste them?
Don't shoot them in your backyard.
Right.
They're not. This is a weapon. We don't just shoot it in the backyard. Bass Pro has an archery range that you can pay to go in and shoot. Archery Field and Sports. There's some others. You know, we're running at them. Raccoon River Park built a nice one, and they're having archery classes and everything. They're out there. Just got to Google them, find out where they're at. Practice though. You know, it's one of them deals where I've shot bow since I was a little kid, but you know, I still have to go out and shoot before I hit the field because what if the sights are off? Putting the strings back on can, you know, so I'll start shooting real heavy in the next few nights. So.
All right, so a lot of things to think about. One, we want you to be safe, but also have a lot of fun and enjoy Iowa's Great Outdoors. If people want to kind of touch base with you to learn more, how can they do so?
Facebook at Chance Patrick or Iowa's Great Outdoors. And archery is a thing that I'm going to do some kids classes. As I'm shooting, I'd rather have some kids in there learning from me, so we'll be posting those a lot here in the next few weeks.
Okay,
Thank
we'll
you,
keep
sir.
an eye out
Thank
for
you.
that.
All right,
Thank you.
7:51. We'll be right back.